wonderful human beings, and welcome to the first ever, on this channel at least, Grad School Collab, international style. If you are new here, my name is Eve Daniels, and I am a grad student studying here in Sweden, and I make videos. Sometimes, when I'm not studying. But I'm not the only one here today. I have guests.
Hi.
Thank you for joining me. We're gonna talk about grad school type stuff, basically. Grad school can be such a complicated thing to try and figure out, especially when you're dealing with international borders and crossing lines and all of that. So I thought it might be helpful to get some input from around the world. Do you guys want to take a sec and introduce yourselves and your channels a little bit?
I have a YouTube channel
which actually at the moment just vlogs my life, which so happens to be about my journey moving to Sweden during the pandemic. The initial conception of the channel started with helping people get into medical school. That was what I was really passionate about. And then obviously I got into medical school and I realised I need to actually revise and I don't have the skills to do both. And so that stopped. And then after getting married and moving to Sweden, yeah, that's when the channel has picked up, and that's what it's about right now, just vlogging
our lives.
Yeah, my channel is about studying and productivity more recently. I started it while studying at Cambridge, started with vlogs. The main motivation behind my channel was the wish to help other people applying to Cambridge to see how life there is and give tips about how you might go about the application process and how to get in. I started doing it consistently at the beginning of last year, which was my final year at Cambridge. And in the meantime, I graduated, so I'm also transitioning to other topics a little bit.
Trying to find a proper niche for my channel because I can't be making videos about Cambridge every week anymore.
My channel's kind of in the middle of an identity crisis, but what is it not? I think that's just a natural part of the evolutionary process when you make YouTube videos, is that anytime you're moving to a new country or you're starting a new chapter in your life, the type of content you make changes with it. I started off making kids content and AuthorTube, and then when I got into grad school, things changed again, but it's just sort of the way life tends to work, you know? But so all of us are currently in grad school in some capacity. We'll get into the details of that, but we're also all not in our home countries. Let's put it that way. So in case you can't tell from my accent, I am American. I'm from Florida, but I'm studying in Sweden. And I'm able to do that because I am half Swedish. I don't speak the language. Please don't ask me to speak Swedish. I can talk at a 4-year-old level. But studying in the US is very different to studying in Sweden.
Yeah, well, studying in the UK is quite different from studying on the continent. And that's something I realized this year when I came here to do my master's in international studies. The main differences, I think, consist of the way the workload is divided throughout the year. I used to write essays every week, and exams were only at the end of the year. Whereas here we've got a lot more contact hours during the week, but we don't have to write anything. It's up to us how much we study every week. On the other hand, exams are at the end of each term, which makes everything a bit tighter.
So I'm actually still in university, but I've just taken like a sabbatical. I go to King's College London, and although I haven't actually studied in 2 different places, I kind of relate to what Teodor was saying, in the sense that so I've done medical school, and the way it works is you get to do something called an intercalation. So you get to do a 3-year degree basically in 1 year. And it can be pretty much in a subject of your choice, but because we study medicine, it kind of relates. And I chose last year to do global health. And so I found it really different the way, like, in medical school, we have so much contact hours. It's pretty much a 9 to 5 every day. You do dissections, lots of practical work, or you're in hospitals. And then I did global health. You had about 18 hours a week, and the contact time was very small in comparison, but also again you then had coursework at the end of the term rather than just an exam at the end of the year. So it was a bit different. But I think going to Cambridge, you would have, from what I've heard, just a lot of essays every week. Whereas I think if you're not going to Oxbridge, it's like you have coursework at the end of term and then you don't see your tutors that often.
It's a totally different experience.
So it's really different when you hear about how the classes are laid out in different places. Because my classes are sort of similar to what you were saying, where you have the studying's completely up to you, and then you have exams at the end. They do also have a big project, but again, that's due at the end. So the class I'm in right now is at what the Swedes call 100%, which means that I'm only taking one class, and I'm just taking that one class for 5 weeks. But so when you're taking a class at 100% speed, that's your only job, is nailing that one class. It's different for you guys too, because Teodor, you went to grad school at Cambridge, but you're not from the UK. Where was it you were from again exactly? Because you've been a couple different places.
Yeah, so I'm going to grad school here, undergrad in Cambridge, and I'm originally from Romania.
Romania. Okay, so wait, you speak Romanian then? German, English. Wait, so how many languages do you speak?
I studied Spanish as well at Cambridge, and I also speak French since high school.
So you speak like 5 languages, more or less. The only thing I speak other than English is like 4-year-old Swedish and really bad Spanish. You said Spanish was one of yours too, right?
Sí, hablo español.
Podemos hablar español si quieres.
Let's only have me ruin one language at a time. Okay, so back to grad schools.
How did you figure out where you wanted to go to grad school? For some people, it's sort of limited by geography. For some people, if you're looking for a specific program. So, like, how did that process work? How did you figure out where you wanted to go to grad school?
I decided to go to Cambridge during high school. I went there during the summer at some point to study some English literature and a 1-week leadership course as well.
Slowly but steadily, I started researching how you do it, and I put together the application and finally got in, luckily. So that's how I ended up at Cambridge. I did modern and medieval languages there, but I started focusing more and more on politics and history during my year abroad, which I also spent here in Vienna working. But I had to write a research paper during that year abroad, and I started gravitating more and more towards history and politics, and I was already thinking about doing a master's in international studies and something connected to politics and diplomacy. And during my year here, my employer told me, do you know about this academy? I think it'd be a good fit for you. And I checked out the Diplomatic Academy of Vienna. It sounded really interesting. The courses here are quite varied, and they're also very aimed at practice in the field. We've got great professors here, and I feel like it's also an intellectual challenge at the same time as it is a place to network. I've loved Vienna for a long time. I've been coming to Austria to ski for a long time during high school as well, and always passing through Vienna. Here is where I learned German when I was younger during the summers. So it's a city I know quite well.
Sorry, I was just going to ask, I think I missed it. What are you studying at the moment, Teodor?
I'm studying international studies. It's basically a combination between international law, EU law, political science, and economics, plus career talks and everything directed towards our starting a career in international organizations or foreign office.
So it was a little bit different for me choosing LAU. I wasn't even going to apply at first because I thought I was going to have to do grad school in Sweden in Swedish, but as it turns out, the program at LAU, because it's a biomedical research program, so heavy on the sciences, it's completely in English. But yeah, I never would have been able to do grad school in the US, so that was a completely different sort of thought process, and it took me years to get to that point, which is why I think I'm considerably older than you guys, aren't I? So I'm 30.
I'm gonna be 25.
And I'm 22.
I could have been your babysitter. That's how much older I am than you.
You speak, I think, 4 languages, been to Cambridge, in grad school, all before the age of 22. This is insane.
I know, it's unbelievable. But we kind of skipped you, Naomi. So wait, how did you pick the school that you ended up going to?
I think it's a bit different from America, the way England works. There is no undergrad. If you're going to university, I guess that's what you call undergrad, and everyone just does that, and then they end there. Yeah. You don't really have to go do a postgrad. And so even if I do medicine, it's all still my undergrad, if that makes sense, until I decide to do a master's or...
Okay.
So I think in America you do your undergrad and then you apply to med school, right?
Oh, you just go straight into med school?
Yeah. This is why I started my YouTube channel. I applied to medical school twice because I didn't get in the first time. And I was devastated. And I was like, my life is over. I applied for universities outside of London. The only thing I did not want to do is stay in London because I really wanted to have the university experience and move out from home. And then I applied to King's College London as a backup because they allowed different entry requirements if you came from an underprivileged background, which I did. And I was like, I pray to God I don't get into here because I don't want to stay at home. And of course, that's where I got in. But like with everything else in my life, it was the best decision ever. I'm so glad I stayed at home, saved lots of money. And also, I still had that experience, that university experience, because at the end of the day, it is what you make it. And I just decided that I was going to pretend I didn't live at home.
I started my undergrad in science, but very quickly realized that there wasn't a way for me to be able to afford grad school right out of the gate in the US. And at the time I hadn't even considered Sweden yet. I switched my major from science to business so that I could, because if you graduate with a bachelor's degree in science, there's nothing that you can do. Like, you can't even teach with a bachelor's degree in science. You have to have a bachelor's degree in teaching. It took years and several other careers in between for me to sort of make that transition. But eventually my dad was like, well, you could always do grad school here in Sweden. And I'm like, Dad, I'm not doing grad school in Sweden. I don't speak Swedish. He's like, well, you could always learn Swedish. And I was like, even if I learn conversational Swedish, that won't help in the sciences because I'm not going to learn how to say immunocytochemistry in Swedish. As it turns out, immunocytochemistry in Swedish is just immunocytochemistry with a funny accent. But then he was like, well, I think some of the programs are actually in English. So I was like, okay, all right, I'll take a look. And I found out that there was a biomedical research program at LU that's completely in English. I was like, all right. I mean, at that point, it seemed silly not to apply. So when you were applying to your schools, how does the application process work? Because I know it's not just different from school to school, it's different from country to country.
So you go to high school, you do GCSEs, and then you go to college, and this is a 2-year course where you do A-levels. You then go to A-levels, and then you pick 4 specific subjects that you study for 2 years in greater detail. If you want to apply to medicine, you normally have to do chemistry and biology, and you normally have to have A-star AA. Just as many A's as you can get. Just because GCSE is 5, get as many A's as you can, get as many A-stars as you can. Same with A-levels. They ask for 3 A-levels, but if you can do 4, if you do 5, 6, get as many as you can, it all helps. And in the first year of your A-levels, that's when you apply for university, and that's when you can apply to be either to do law, medicine, global health, any subject that you desire. And normally with medicine in England, you have to put in your applications on October 15th, and it's pretty much the same each year. and then you get interviews around December to March, and then you get your offer, which is normally a conditional offer, and then you start. Depending on which universities you want to apply to, you also have an extra course that you have to meet. It's either the UK CAT or the BMAT, and that's if you're applying only to medical school.
So the US equivalent of that would be like the MCAT?
Yeah, exactly. And then you have interviews based on your personal statement, and you go in. And your interviews can either be group interviews. I've had one of those; they're pretty good. Or you can have in my university. I don't even know if I'm allowed to say. Some universities, some, not mine. You have a series of multiple mini interviews. So you have like 6 interviews, and they're all 5 minutes long with 6 different people. So interview, break, interview, break, interview, break, interview, and you have different stations.
It sounds like speed dating, but for grad school.
Basically, that's what it is. And that's it. You're now in medical school. Yay!
For me, in both applications, the most important part of the application I felt was the personal statement.
That's what I spent most time with, and tweaking and trying to make it sound like myself, but also knowledgeable and interesting.
Well, that should be easy.
It is at first, until you realize you have to cut like 1,000 words and keep all the ideas in.
There's a famous quote, I always feel bad for not remembering it, who said it, but it's, "Sorry this letter is so long, I had very little time to write it." Because it takes a long time to be concise. I mean, anyone who's ever edited a paper knows that the first draft is probably the easiest step, and then figuring out how to pare it down to be concise but still contain everything that you need it to, that's the process that always takes most people the longest.
Can I just interject? Because I used to think personal statements were really important, and then my partner actually works as an admissions officer. And so I thought my tutors were the ones reading my personal statement. No, it was just like him reading my personal statement. Tick boxing, does it talk about medicine? Tick. Does it have a book in there? Tick. I'm like, my heart and my soul, just so he could read it. The guy in the office. It might be different for Cambridge, obviously, but that really hurt me when I learned that.
I never realized that.
So you had to write a personal statement thingy for your application as well?
Yeah, I had to write a motivation letter, also in English here. The only difference in the application process here was the fact that my high school grades weren't so crucial, of course, but also the fact that there was no interview. So I just applied by mid-January last year, and then in about a month's time I found out that I was accepted, and that's it.
So it's really different in Sweden, at least from what I'm used to. They have one central application base. It's called universityadmissions.se, and you just submit everything through there. Your transcripts, your grades, your test scores, and that's it. And then you click which schools you want. So it was a completely digital process for me. I didn't have to write any essays or letters. I didn't have to do any interviews or application process like that. So I went through that whole process, and then I did it wrong, and I thought I didn't get in, and I cried on camera, which is super embarrassing, but then I did get in. So here I am. But that's very different to how it is in the US, where you're applying to individual schools one at a time. And all of those schools have an application fee. There was no application fee for LEU. Again, I'm not sure if that's because I'm Swedish or just because there's no application fee, but it could be anywhere from $10 to $100 to even more dollars to apply to a school in the US, which is why applying to more than 3 or 4 schools at any given time is kind of a lot to ask. And when you apply to schools in the US, all of those schools have a different application process, not just a different form to fill out and different places to send your transcripts, but they have different essays. It's not like you're writing one statement. Other than the fact that it costs money, you can't apply to a bunch of schools because you just don't have time to write that many essays.
Sorry, I should have said that's the same with the UK as well. You don't apply to each individual university. You have this centralized system called UCAS, sorry, and then you upload your personal statement, and then you click the 5 universities you want to apply to.
Oh, so it's just America that's weird. And we already knew America was weird.
There are some countries in Europe as well that do individual applications.
So you just have to write one mission thing.
Yeah, but in the UCAS application, it's always a trade-off
between these universities, and you write your personal statement going for your first choice, and then the other universities which have a slightly different courses are a bit it's not such a great fit for those, but still you have to make it sound like it kind of works for all of them. And some universities like Cambridge also have an SAQ afterwards, so after you send in your application in about a week, they send you a supplementary answer questionnaire, I think it's called SAQ, and they ask you some more stuff about, more in detail, which is more like sounds like the separate form you have to fill in for each university in the US that you mentioned before.
But Naomi, you moved to Sweden completely unrelated to grad school. Was it because of your company, or how did that old thing happen? Because we both moved basically in the middle of a pandemic.
So last year, what I was doing is the global health course. So that was another sabbatical in between interrupting my medical school program to give me the global health bachelor's degree. And halfway through that, I had also started up a business which was starting to get some traction and was looking like a good idea to pursue. And so I decided in February or March, I think it was, that I was going to take a year out to pursue the business. And it was simultaneously when the world was ending, and I was like, well, I'm already taking a year out. I don't need to be in London. I don't need to be in the UK. And then my partner saw a house on eBay in Sweden. And I was like, there is no way we're buying a house in Sweden on eBay, on eBay in Sweden. But we were really excited by what was on offer, and we just had a look around. And then we found Sweden was actually a pretty feasible place to stay and a nice place to stay whilst everything was shutting down. And that's when we moved to Sweden.
Because I'm Swedish, I'm a Swedish citizen, so grad school here is nothing. Like, it's completely free. I have not paid a single fee. In fact, I get paid a small amount by the government for going to grad school to sort of like student aid. But obviously that varies a little bit with different countries, and it's made even more complicated with the EU because Sweden's a partial member of the EU and the UK was in the EU, but now it's not. So for example, Teodor, if you wanted to come and study in Sweden, it would be completely free for you because Romania's in the EU. But Naomi, you would have to pay because grad school in the US is expensive. It is. You're talking $1,000 a credit hour, so depending on where you're going, anywhere from $30,000 to $50,000 per year. Which, I mean, I don't know many 20-year-olds that have a spare $100,000 lying around, but if you could introduce me. So being able to afford grad school in the US was never even a question. Like, it just straight up wasn't possible. If I didn't have this opportunity because I'm Swedish, it would be a completely different thing.
Yeah,
it's really tricky with covering the tuition fees. I also consider myself very lucky for having had a window of opportunity to study in the UK and receive a student loan for my studies there, for my tuition fee, because otherwise I couldn't have done it. Yeah, had I been a few years older, that wouldn't have been an option, because now they don't offer the student loan to citizens of EU member states anymore because after Brexit. Here in Vienna, The tuition fee is about as much as a master's in the UK, but only that it's 2 years. It's approximately the same fee as a 1-year master. Combined, the 2 years combined are as much as a 1-year master in the UK. There are a lot of places in Europe where you can do a master's for free, as you say, in Sweden or in Germany as well, or even here in Vienna at Uni Wien. I went for the Diplomatic Academy because of how exciting the courses are and the opportunities. Even if it's costly, there are opportunities for funding. Anyone watching and looking into going to a master's, I'm totally encouraging you to look for funding.
Here in Sweden, there was never really a full lockdown. They do advise you keep your space, obviously, and they don't really want you on public transport if you don't need to be there. So all of my classes are in distance mode, which means that I'm doing everything from my laptop here. And on the one hand, if it had started out this way, I probably wouldn't have gone, because I could have just done this from my bedroom in Florida. But on the other hand, I feel really bad saying this, but it was kind of convenient for me that there was a pandemic going on when I started grad school. Anytime you move somewhere new, you're always like, oh, there's this list of experiences that I need to try. I need to go do this and do that and meet up with people. And that FOMO, that fear of missing out, is really big sometimes. But because it was a pandemic, I could just be like, sorry, guess we'll have to meet up later. Which I feel bad about, but also has been kind of a really nice relief, because it means that I'm able to focus almost 100% on studying, which is the point of me being here. But if I'd been here otherwise, I would have felt bad saying no to social outings, you know? Especially when you're starting at a new school, because then everyone's like, oh, let's go to the clubs, or let's go. I don't know. I don't party. I don't know what young people do.
I can't imagine starting a whole new course under these situations. As I said, for me, the whole university experience was quite a big thing for me. I wanted to make sure I made friends. In terms of medical school, so 2 things happened. It didn't affect me because, again, I said I was doing global health at the time. But the first lockdown, all practical hospital visits were cancelled. When they brought in the second lockdown, they allowed us to go back in, because they said at the end of the day, this is how you learn. And I think the cases were going down, so the healthcare system wasn't actually that overstretched. So we were, my friends were still able to go into hospital placements, and even now they still go into hospital placements. And also my friends who were graduating actually went into hospitals early. So they graduated early and were just on the front line helping the staff. A lot of things happened, and it was just changing with the situation, and everyone was just adapting. But at the moment, I think for medical school students, we're pretty much the only people who have a normal-ish experience. We still go into placements. We're still learning on the job. Especially for studying, I think, effective study groups are good. It's true. If we were in the same course, I would make friends with you, Teodor.
That's so funny, yeah. Well, but I agree that study groups are important, but we actually managed to have some pretty effective study groups here at the Academy online.
So you still do study groups? Are they like mandated study groups? Because we have group project groups, but we're not really doing study groups.
No, we're encouraged by the professors to form groups and talk about the material, and we organized ourselves.
Just to give you a brief overview of how the corona situation unfolded here in Vienna. At the beginning, it was pretty normal. There were some restrictions, but not as strict as in the past month. So we actually got to know each other really well. We were all tested at the beginning. We could interact a little bit, especially in the first week, and that was really important in creating of belonging here at the Academy and the feeling of community.
The lack of commute since we went into distance mode has been really great for my study times, and I'm not going out at all. So there's plenty of time to study, But at the same time, there's only so long you can stare at a screen before your brain starts to... So I've been trying to take breaks, and I go for walks almost every day, sometimes twice a day, just to get up and stretch my legs. I've been trying to do all those preventative steps as far as mental health care goes. I built some pretty good habits when lockdown happened back in the US in the spring, so I've just been sort of transplanting those habits over here so that I could not lose my mind. So, what would you say to someone looking at grad school now? I mean, obviously we're still kind of in the middle of a pandemic situation, and the world's still just a little bit weird. A vaccine is still coming, but from a biomedical standpoint, we're realistically looking at another year to 2 years before we get anywhere close to normal, whatever that new normal is going to be, because it's not going to be exactly the same as the old normal. So that's a factor. And then of course there's the fact that for a lot of people, grad school is a huge financial investment. I mean, I managed to get grad school for free because I'm Swedish, but that's not an option for everyone. So obviously that's a very different sort of thing to ask when you're investing the money versus if you can get grants, or if you're able to go to a country that offers school for free, or if you live in a country that offers school for free. Not everyone has the money just sitting around to be like, oh yes, grad school, that's a great idea. Especially not post-pandemic when so many people lost their jobs. So that's sort of, I mean, is it worth it? You know?
This might be a bit controversial, but I just feel like if you are spending the money, it should be an investment in yourself, and you should have or think of the return on your investment. So what are you going to get as a result of doing this course? And be quite critical about that, because you don't want to spend the money and realize that you have nothing to show for it. And when I say nothing to show for it, it's not to say necessarily that you're going to get this specific job, but it might even be just for your own self-development, and you know that this is what you want to understand and learn more about it, and that is valuable in and itself. But I feel like it's very important to think about the return on investment that you're spending the money and the time studying, especially in these situations, because you might not have the same experience, you might not, be able to socialize and network in the same way you could have last year. So I think that's just something to think about personally.
Yeah, that social aspect of school is really key for a lot of people, I feel like. I mean, thankfully, I had a couple of weeks where I got to meet everyone before we went to distance mode, so I feel like I know them a little better, but you can only get to know someone so well over the course of a month or two. So for me, the timing just really worked in some weird way. But then there's also the social part and missing out on that. There's a YouTuber, I can't remember her name. She lives in London, and she had to deal with this exact same thing. The figuring out if it was worth it with distance mode and everything else.
Is she a black girl who's now in Harvard?
Yeah, that's her. V, I think. She lives with Malala. But she was going through that same process. But for me, it was first and foremost about the program. So missing out on the potential social aspect wasn't a deal breaker. But if it is, I just think you need to be really critical and almost harsh about that, and really think about how much the experience is worth to you, how much you get out of that connection versus the actual program. Because if that social part is as big a part of it as the lessons, then it might be worth waiting, or it might be worth self-educating yourself in some way.
I'm not necessarily an introvert. I think I'm halfway in between. I don't like too much social interaction, and I don't.
Yeah, no, most people are a mix, I think.
Yeah, but I think even in spite of friends, for me, it's quite difficult to make friends, genuine friends. But just when I say socializing, it might mean just increasing your network. And it's only the last couple of weeks I realized how important it is to network with people, and how that can further the people that you know, and also career development. And as you said, being a diplomat, it's all about who you know. And that's one thing that university gives you. It gives you access to people you get to know. You get to know your tutors. You get to know. So yeah, I'm not just necessarily talking about socializing with friends, but like even just the tutors themselves.
Yeah, that's a really valuable asset in a lot of industries. But it's just having those connections, having the network accessible to you, knowing the guy who knows about the job that you may not have otherwise heard of, like creating that network. It has a worth and a value of its own. So if that's a primary thing for you, then take that into consideration.
Totally. And to be honest, for me,
I felt like coming here and doing this master's was, despite the pandemic, the best thing I could have done. I've always thought about what I'm doing as being part of a certain path that I'm following, and the fact that the pandemic didn't totally ruin my plans. I don't know, a lot of things could have happened, like postponing graduation until next year, or things like that, which didn't happen, and I'm really happy that I could graduate, that I could come here and start this master's, have those 4 weeks to also socialize a bit. It was the perfect balance, and I'm on the same track as if there had been no pandemic, of course with the social distancing measures and all that entails, but still, for me it's all about not letting external events interfere with the path or minimize that interference.
Yeah, the internal locus of control. My mom likes to say a quote. It's something that's actually helped a lot. Give me the strength to change what I cannot accept, the grace to accept what I cannot change, and the wisdom to know the difference. And I think it's that last bit, the wisdom to know the difference, that's the really important part. And I think that's hard for a lot of people, focusing on what you can affect and what is in your wheelhouse, and trying not to be consumed by the things that aren't. And that just really helps as far as me and my own personal mental health, at least. Especially with moving forward sort of from the chaos that was 2020 into what is hopefully a better and brighter 2021. I wanted to thank you guys so much for coming by and chatting with me. Stop me from talking to my plants all day long. So what kind of shenanigans do you guys have out there on the internet? Grad school or otherwise, it doesn't matter.
Find me on Naomi and Jacks YouTube channel. That will give you some more Swedish content. If you happen to be a black woman looking for hair and beauty services in the UK, then follow Beauty Noir UK. You can always email me as well, nj.cbc@outlook.com, if you need help applying to university, because I have mentored quite a lot of people to get into medical school.
I will put all of their links down below so you can grab them and check out all the cool stuff they've got going on.
you can find me on my YouTube channel,
which is titled Teodor NG. I make videos about studying, productivity, the occasional real-time study with me video. Those are lit right now on YouTube. Yeah, generally self-improvement. I mean, that's what I've been doing since I know my name.
Yeah, I think self-improvement is just kind of an aspect of the human condition, like accidental or otherwise. We're all just trying to figure out this weird little world that we've got, so sometimes you improve yourself on purpose, and sometimes it happens because you figure out after the 4th time of smacking into a wall not to do that. So thank you guys so much for coming, and thank all of you for being here. Make sure to check out their channels, and feel free to stop by this channel on Sundays. I will probably be doing a sort of like study time accountability thing. Basically, I need to study, so I figure if I say I'm gonna do a live stream, then I have to get stuff done, you know? But again, thank you guys so much for coming by and spending time with me, and I can't wait to catch up with you soon. Bye!
Bye.
Watch Star Trek.